extremophiles grown in India that are known to harbor a plethora of commercially important enzymes. Her team has sequenced and analyzed 20 species of cyanobacteria and fungi, which is the highest number of genomes from a single lab in India. Her group has created many resources for hosting and analyzing those genomes, which is what probably she will be presenting today. The software package Genome Annotator Lite GAL is created as a containerized package for the ease of installation in any system in any system independent way. She is affiliated with IICB, which is a CSIR lab, as a senior principal scientist. She also worked as the lead genomic scientist at the Oomocytes Pathogen Genomes at the Virginia Bioinformatics Institute at the Virginia Tech for a decade-long time. She has been awarded with the prestigious Ramalinga Swamy Fellowship for returning back to India, and she has a wide variety of publications that have come out of her lab, PhD students who have graduated with her. She is a prolific publisher and has been very well cited. She also serves as a senior editor at Molecular Plant Microbial Interaction Journal, and also as an associate editor at Frontiers in Genetics and Frontiers in Microbiology. She also is serving as a research advisory team member of National Tea Research Foundation. So with that introduction, may I request Professor Tripathi to present her talk. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for inviting me for this wonderful conference. I have been listening to the talks, they're amazing. And before I start, I just want to make sure you can see my slides.
Yes, the slides are visible.
Okay, great. So thank you for the wonderful introduction. And my lab, as you have already said, that we are interested in understanding the extremophiles by using genomics as a tool. And while doing so, we deal with a lot of data. And that's what I'm going to touch upon today to show you how we are dealing with this huge amount of data that is coming out of the sequencers. This is a very nice, interesting slide. If you see, it's a beauty of nature, and nature can do wonders, which we scientists cannot do in the lab. Be it beauty, symmetry, or the strength we have in the spider cobwebs, and the antibiotics, which is produced by the fungi, say penicillin, which is already presented in the previous talks. And one of the organisms which is not very well studied in India is the cyanobacteria, where people have studied about the ecology, but we have not explored them deeper. And these are the organisms we are interested in to study what makes them extremophiles, and what are the secrets they hold for life that they have preserved for the last 3 billion years. And we are also trying to identify the pathways which can lead to engineering those into systems which is more amenable for producing antibiotics and other important things. So going back to a little bit of basics, we all know that what makes every organism different from each other is the nucleic acid, which is lying inside the nucleus, which is nothing but a double-stranded DNA, and which codes which is existing in a knotted form with the proteins, which are the nucleosomes. And when it is unwound, it transcribes and produces the RNA, which are the messengers, and it produces the proteins. And the proteins act as enzymes or catalyst, which catalyzes the reaction. And that is what differentiates one organism from another. And what makes the difference is the way these 4 nucleotides are arranged. There are only 4 variables, that is A, T, G, C, and the order in which they are arranged actually determines what a particular organism is capable of doing. And this is an amazing field where many things have been developed recently, and which is more powerful techniques called as the sequencing. And sequencing deals with finding exactly the order in which these nucleotides are arranged. And this is where our interest is coming to. And if we look at some of the predictions which were made earlier in 2010, it was shown that the sequencing data is going to be it's going to be very, very high. And if you see the Moore's law, it says that it has to grow in a certain way, but we have surpassed the Moore's law, and the data generation coming out of the sequencers is actually making the world population growth looks flat. So we can see the amount of data we are generating, and this is just a screenshot of the data that is being uploaded into the GenBank. GenBank is the repository where most of the data which is sequenced, published or unpublished, land there. And after 2000, you can see there is a giant leap in the amount of data that has been deposited. And thanks to the sequencers, the second and the third generation sequencers, they are churning out this data. And how we make sense out of this data. What we do from the sequencers is we are getting a lot of small fragments, like small reads or small sequencing reads, we call those, and they're of size of 100 to 250 bases. And they come like in large quantities, like gigabytes and terabytes. So, but we cannot make sense out of the data which is coming out of the sequencers. So we have to use bioinformatics as a tool, which was already seen by visionaries such as Walter Gilbert. He said that the computers are going to be the biggest players, and all we are interested is in a needle in a haystack. And this is a very popular image I have taken from Twitter, and what we are getting from data from the sequencers are these tiny dots. It makes no sense at all, and when we try to understand them, they are just the dots with some information, but unless we connect the dots, we cannot make an insight out of it. And that's what we are trying to do with the sequencers, and trying to connect the dots. And some of the results I'll present here, we have got using the sequencing or our analytic tools. And this is just to impress you upon the type of data we are dealing with these days. Earlier days, we are talking about megabytes and gigabytes. Right now, we cannot talk even less than a terabyte, petabyte, exabyte, and so on. And our saving grace are some of the programming languages, which are amazing students and open source developers. They just release it for people to biologists or computational biologists to code, because otherwise these are some of the high level programming languages which are very useful for biologists to decipher this data. And this is what we hugely use it. So in a nutshell, my lab is interested in creating the huge workflows from the sequencing data, and trying to understand what the data is doing by identifying the gene cluster or the metabolic pathways, and then doing downstream metabolic re-engineering, which is what we call it our lab fondly as computational genomics lab. So this is a bit of introduction. And today I'll be talking about one particular tool that we have developed because this is a very useful tool, and this is a very recent one. And while working on this, I'll talk about a little bit of history about this and why we came up with this. And we found that there is no such tools available right now which can do a seamless analysis of data right from the sequencers to making sense out of it. Apart from that, just another little bit of work for the workflow system that I'm talking about. Another very pet project in my lab is developing a scriptome. A scriptome means when the users are providing their information. The users or the biologists, they are just using the common speaking language without knowing what exactly is going underneath. So that language is, so we have created a lots of control vocabulary for the systems that I have just talked about. 4 different things we are working on. One is genome assemblies and transcript quantification, differential expression analysis using RNA-seq or microarray, and the metagenome analysis and data visualization. And in order to do this, the users probably will not know what are the different algorithms available and what the algorithm can do for them, and which one is the right algorithm for getting the optimal results. So since we have done hundreds of benchmarking, and we have built some knowledge base out of it, and we have created a control vocabulary for these 3 processes that I have talked about. And this is just parsing the user's language. So we have developed a system where the user can just use the pull down languages like what type of data, what organism, whether it is a prokaryote or a eukaryote, what kind of sequencer it is producing the data, and what is the coverage and what they want to do. And from that, using our underlying information that we have, we build a pipeline, and the pipeline can without users knowledge can run it and then produce the output. So coming back little bit to the pipeline, how it works. When we are getting the data from the sequencers, they are not actually they are not ready for somebody to do the analysis. There are several steps that happen before that. And the first step is the cleaning of the reads. When the reads are coming, the reads are of different sizes, and the reads are actually interpreted by a software depending on each base is tagged with a fluorophore, and that fluorophore emits a particular light, and the light is sensed by the sensor, and it predicts, because it's a prediction method. Each of the bases are associated with a probabilistic value. So for each of the nucleotides, we have different colors, and the prediction tells whether with how much confidence it is calling A as a or T as a T, and so on. So that is called as the base calling, and the base callings are given with a score, particular score. So the higher the score, the better is the possibility that this is called correctly. So most often what happens when we are getting a data, it sometimes the caller scores are not very good towards the end. So in that case, if we keep those parts of the sequences, they'll interfere with the downstream data analysis. So the first step is to trim out all the low quality scores. So that is also part of the cleaning. And another part of the cleaning is actually when there are other unwanted sequences like adapters and other things that has to be removed. And most often we know in Indian context, we have our data is most often mixed with some contaminants, and that contaminants have to be removed. So this is a very essential step. That is the first step, which is carried out when the user says that, okay, clean my data. Then data cleaning is undertaken in our pipeline. And then the next step is when we are using just one genome, then it is easy for somebody to just put it in a directory and start working with that, write the scripts and do the analysis. But when you are doing 20s or say 30, 50 genomes, in that case, you have to have a particular directory structure or a standard operating procedure where you have to create certain names have to be given so that the pipeline identifies where the data is lying and what kind of extension to expect. So the next is to create the project outflow and to create the configuration files. Once the configuration files are built, the user defined languages have been parsed to put the proper pipeline, and then the analysis workflow happens. So this is the core of what we propose we have done with our pipelines. Now, as I said, that genome assembly is one of our pet projects where we get the data from the sequencers and we try to assemble those. So in other words, when you are getting the data from the sequencers, the reads are very small, as I said, like between 100 to 250 bases. So that long read of DNA sequence will not contain any information, because that is too small for a particular gene, or that is too small for anything else. So the first step for us is to assemble those reads into longer contiguous segments, and all we get is a heap of sequences like this. And this is like a puzzle where we have to join these pieces together, and these pieces joined together will make large enough contiguous piece for us to understand, to do the gene prediction and other things, so that we understand things better. And there are many algorithms which are available right now. If you look at the literature, there are hundreds of assembly algorithms are there, and they are based on different algorithms like overlap layout consensus, which was developed for longer reads, and De Bruijn graph methods, which is there for a for short reads and large amount of reads, and the greedy algorithms. So the users, if the user is choosing a particular algorithm, the outcome is going to be different. For each of these, the algorithm is going to produce a different result. So how do we select the best result for our particular data type and sequencer? So in order to do that, our system, what it does is, first, this is just a broad view of this. This is simply oversimplified version of what the pipeline does. Right now, we have two reliable platforms. One is a second generation sequencing platform, and the another one is a third generation sequencing platform, which is producing long reads. And the second one is produces the short reads, and Illumina is one of the best platforms so far because of the less number of errors. So first, the user will tell that what platform they have used for sequencing the data. If it is Illumina plus long read, then a particular type of algorithm will be used. If there is just Illumina, which is using paired end and met paired data, then a particular algorithm will be used. And if just long reads are there, then a particular algorithm will be used. And then error correction is also another step that also takes place here. And apart from that, after the user provides the platform information, then the data types. Data types can be so many types, where which organism it is whether it is a prokaryote or it is a eukaryote, and whether it is the depth of coverage is good enough, means whether a particular base is sequenced on an average a certain number of times. If the coverage is good, then the output will be good. And the composition, like GC and other repetitive composition, and whether or not there is a reference available, just to name a few. So after getting all the information from the user, the pipeline, it will set up certain, it will choose the particular assembler to be used for this purpose, and it will make a command line, and then it will carry out the assembly. And this is based on the hundreds of assemblies we have done for benchmarking, and we have developed the logic to be used for a certain kind of workflow. So using this, I'll just show you some of the results that has been published and how it is useful, because assembly is the very first step for understanding any kind of genome. This is one example. We have worked with Leishmania, and Leishmania is a pathogen. Our institute is working heavily on Leishmania donovani, which causes Kala Azar. And you see that when the Leishmania is grown in the lab, after certain passages, it loses the infectivity. So we had taken two different passages of Leishmania. One is a early passage which had virulence, and the later passages which has lost the virulence. And then we compared whether there are changes in the genome, and we have compared it with the GenBank genome which is available, which is named as this LDBPK 2821 chromosome. Then we found that HTI5 is the late passage, which is not infective, and HTI4 is a infective passage. So when we compared our HTI4 with the GenBank genome, then we found that there are some variations. There are some genomic rearrangement we have found it. And when we did with HTI5, we found that they're completely aligning with each other. And when we compared HTI4 with HTI5, it clearly shows that there are genomic rearrangements, which is probably is responsible for the loss of virulence. And this is one thing that we have discovered using our genomic and assembly tools. And we have also found that there are several genes. When we did a Go enrichment study, we found that the gene structure and the composition and enrichment also varied between the early passage and the late passage. And this was a very interesting paper that we published 3 years back. And we also show that there are genes which are like ABC transporter genes, which are very essential for detoxification of the drugs. So when there are drugs are given, then the detoxification happens. And then we have found that there are some changes, some of the non-synonymous changes has happened between the early passage and the late passage, and which is also similar. So in other words, what we have found is the GenBank genome that is deposited is probably of that of a late passage, which is not infective, as you can see from here. And interestingly, we also found many regions of the genome which contains the loss of domains and loss of certain part of a gene, which causes it, which makes it a pseudogene, and is also responsible for the loss of infectivity. So this is an example where we found that in HTI4, we had a certain region of the gene which is lost in HTI5, as you can see here. Coming to speed genomes, and speed genomes is a different concept where using genomics, we can see that the genome itself is actually fluid. Genome is constantly varying, contrary to what we believe that genome is static. Genome is, so we have seen that we have studied with a lot of pathogens like plant pathogens, omycetes pathogens, and we found that the genes which are responsible for causing infections are called as effectors. And these effectors are located in the repeat-rich regions of the genome, and which is constantly in flux. So it keeps on changing, it keeps on evolving very fast. And the regions of the genome which does not change are called as the gated community, which is quite conserved and which has very densely packed genes. And we have also shown that using genomics, that the effectors which are present in a very gene sparse region, and as you can see the dots here, these dots are where the effector genes are present, whereas the housekeeping and other genes are present in the more conserved and more compact regions of the genome. And this has been a very quite a acceptable norm these days. And using this concept, many new effectors and virulence pathogen related genes have been discovered, which can be used for making a resistant, which can be used for developing resistant strategies for crops and so on. And another organism we have worked on is a endophyte associated endophyte, which was isolated from a mine which had contamination, which had other radioactive contaminations from West Bengal. So this organism is Rhodotorula mucilaginosa, and this is an endophyte, and it was shown that where it is growing, where this organism was isolated from a contaminated field, the typha is a grass, kind of a wild grass, and the wild grass is growing very happily, and they are very strong there. And we are very curious, and we wanted to understand that why these organisms are so much adaptive to this kind of environment. And then we found that typha is harboring an endophyte, which is Rhodotorula mucilaginosa, and we found that they have a growth enhancing effects. So what are endophytes? Endophytes are the organisms which benefits its host. It compared to the parasite, when the parasite, both of them invade the host, but endophytes have a synergistic effect on the host, whereas the parasite destroys the host. So there is a switch. And we found that in Rhodotorula, the switch has been found by a large cluster of which is called as a 19A cluster, which was deleted in Rhodotorula, whereas it was there in its cousins, virulent cousins, where this 19A cluster was intact. And this possibly led to switch between parasitism to endophytism. And this was a very nice finding, and this was published also 2 years back in DNA Research. And we have also found that this organism is being able to have a synergistic effect with the rice plants. And when we looked at it, we found that there are glycoproteins which are involved in the host cell invasion. This organism can invade the cells, but it does not have the virulence effect. That means it has deleted the 19A cluster, but it has also expanded its host infectivity. And that is why it is being able to survive in a range of host plants. And it also has a surveillance system where it is like plants or the host can sense chitin of the fungal cell wall. So this organism, we found that it has evaded the host surveillance system by producing one enzyme called as chitolase, so which degrades its own chitin. So the host does not recognize it, and then it can just survive on the host cell, and then it can do endophytic characteristics. And also certain interesting other features, like it scavenges the degraded chitin. So once the chitins are degraded, the plants could still recognize those. So it has a lysame domain which scavenges the degraded chitins, and this was also found to be there, and it is highly expressed there. And we also found that so it has multiple mechanisms to evade the host surveillance system, like salicylic acid is a mechanism in which the host evades the pathogens, plants evades the pathogen, and endophyte like this produces certain enzymes like salicylate hydrolase, which degrades the salicylate so that the host cannot recognize it and it can have a very successful infection. And this is also another comparative feature where we are showing that there are intact mating loci for our strain compared to its pathogenic cousin, so that it can maintain its heterozygosity. Now coming back to the system that I initially started to talk about, that is, we have built a system called as genome annotator light. And genome annotator, the architecture looks like this. The genome annotator light sits here in the core of it, and there are other existing algorithms which are used for analyzing the data in various forms. And the user input comes from here, and it is being processed. The ones that we see in yellow are the systems that we have created. And in the output, we have a web-based user interface and a data warehouse which can be used for browsing the data. So going back to little bit of history, when I was working in Virginia Tech, that time I was working on a schema called a genome unified schema. And that is a time where lots of genomes have been sequenced, and there was a need for creating a schema. And there was a huge team, and we are also part of it, which was this team has designed a huge schema which had 440 tables, and it was running on Oracle. So we had created resources earlier and we had published before. But when I came back to India, I found that in IICB we could not purchase Oracle, and we did not think that it is a sustainable model. So immediately we wanted to trim this or change it to an open source scheme so that we can do it easily. And then we started working on it. So one of my graduate students, Arijit Panda, he was from computer science. That's the only time we had a CSR fellow who had a BTech degree. So he, along with me, and we worked on this schema, and we simplified it. We pruned it in such a way that without losing any functionalities, we could retain all the existing features, and then we could host our data. and we call it as uMicrobeDB Lite, and which was running in a lightweight system. But then when it was created, that time we realized that in order to put the data in or upload the data in, we had to run several softwares, or we had to run several programs to make the data available for the uMicrobeDB Lite and to have the loaders. So that is why we came up with an idea to create a portable system called a Genome Annotator Lite, which should contain everything, rather than we struggling doing everything one by one, and which is not very portable from, we could host it by ourselves, but if we give it to a non-biology lab, they cannot do it. So that is the whole idea why we created this system. So for this, we have adopted a Docker-based platform where we have packaged everything into Docker, and then we have packaged everything right from the MySQL, PHP, CGI, Perl, every software, Apache, into this package into one. And then we also had a plethora of bioinformatics tools, starting from assembly, gene calling, gene annotation, BLAST, HMM, just to name a few, SignalP, everything packaged together so that it runs in a software independent manner. So anybody can just take it out and then they can run it. So right now it is hosted in GitHub, and the user just need to pull it using this command and then run it. Once you run it, either you can immediately, it will be available on the website. It will look like you can just run it like this, localhost or IP address of your machine. So underlying the schema, it does the following. First you Docker pull, you Docker run, then it creates the GUI. Then once the GUI is built, which I'll show you the screenshots in the following slides, it takes 4 different types of inputs. Either something which is fully annotated, a genome is fully annotated, it can take. It has no annotation, that means only the FASTA files are there, it will take. If it has minimal annotation, means only the genes are called, it will also take. And product annotation means when the genes are called, but the genes are actually found, the products are identified by running some similarity search. So using this, so out of these 4, then you can upload that to GUI, and then immediately what it will do is, it will, so suppose you are a recurring user, suppose you have already done GAL installation or you have run it and you just want to upload the genomes, then it will immediately check whether the schema is created or not. If the schema is created, then it will not create any more schema. It will check for the shared resources. So it uses shared resources such as GenBank's taxonomy data, it uses Codon and multiple other things. Then it will find if it is shared resources are there, then it will not fetch any more things from outside and it will run analysis. But if shared resources are not there, it is going to pull it out. And then it will check the schema. Suppose you have no schema, then it will create the schema and it will run like this. The next thing is, depending on what kind of input data is given, it will run the analysis. Like for example here, and there are 4 types of input, and there is depending on the input, immediately the configuration file will be created, which will instruct the software to do a particular type of analysis. And then if input data type is not having any annotation, then it will do this whole pipeline, it will run. And if it has minimal annotation, then it will start from running BLASTP and so on. And if there is product annotation, then it will go for SignalP and other types of annotation. And then in the end, it will run a comparative genomics analysis. Coming to the performance of this system, it has been tested. So if you look, if the genomes are of different sizes, but if there is no annotation available, actually the time increases, but actually it runs very fast. You can see the time in minutes. It takes few minutes to run for small genomes, but as the genomes increase for no annotation, it takes longer time. And this is a zoomed up version of this particular area that you are seeing here with annotation. Here you see that after a certain time, the number of genes actually doesn't matter. The time becomes flattened because this runs blast and so on. So it takes 1 hour or so for running. So this is the pipeline I had shown you. So once you do a Docker run and Docker pull and Docker run, immediately it will show create this URL and depending on where you have installed it. So here I have chosen 9595 as my port number. So this is how it looks like. It will create a home page like this, and this will be the menu. And here it will have two views. One is tree view and one is list view. Tree view is for file. It is running the phylogenetic tree for this organism from the shared resource data. And list is just a linear view. Once you have this, it will show no organisms are there. Next, you can do click on the genome upload. Then these 4 types of upload will appear here. You can choose the type of data you have, GenBank, product annotation, minimal or no annotation. Then once you submit it, it will start running in the background. This is when we have run a lot of cyanobacteria belonging to this particular species, Microcystis aeruginosa, and these are the strains. And we also do version control, and you can see that it is grouping them on the basis of their orders. And this data is coming from the GenBank. So from the GenBank, we are getting order information, and automatically it has been ordered into the clades they belong to. And once you click on this each organism, you see the tracks, the genomic tracks that has been created. And these are the gene models, and this is based on HTML5, which is loading really fast. And this browser was created by us from scratch. And these are the coding regions, and these are the non-coding regions. You can click on this and you can get the intergenic regions. And this is the comparative genomics panel track, which shows you, if you zoom in, you can see it more clearly because this is very dense. Then you can see which area is the most conserved area. So from here, I can tell that probably if you look at this region, which is blank here, is probably very unique for this particular organism, whereas it is missing in the remaining of its related species. And then the gene view is embedded with the emboss packages. So emboss package can show you different outputs with a graphical user interface, which is very interesting. And we have posted not only our databases, but also all our packages in our GitHub page, lab GitHub page. And this is one. So we have altered some of the pipelines, and we have very interesting results. And we have analyzed our own genomics data, and one can just easily go and check it. And this is one resource we have built called as umicrobedb.org, which was published earlier. But we are right now working with it to increase the number of genomes. And this is the one such resource which is accessed by throughout the world. And these are right now it is having 32 genomes, and we are working with 128 genomes currently. And this is another resource for cyanobacteria, which we are invested in very heavily for our other interest. And what I have taught, we have published a lot, but I have just talked to you about few resources and few information which I have highlighted here. And this is not possible without my lab family, which my students, and some students are not here, especially Arijit, who did most of the work. And here Aditya, who worked with the pipeline, who was my postdoc. And all other students have contributed in many, many different ways. So with this, I would like to thank you all, and also my funding agency, DBT, CSIR, Ramalingoswamy, for funding generously for the projects. Thanks a lot. I can take questions now.
Yes, thank you, Professor Tripathi, for a wonderful talk and presenting a wide variety of tools that you have developed in your lab. Looks like there is one question at least already coming up. It's in the chat box. So one of the question is, genome rearrangement or plasticity was found in late passage Leishmania culture. what factors or genes in particular were found responsible for the loss of virulence in late passage leishmania?
This is a very interesting question. Actually, we found that in Indian variety, there are a lot of ABC transporters. The ABC transporters are involved in the drug detoxification. And we found that this particular gene family has been changed. So when one organism, when the leishmania is virulent, it contains a lot of ABC transporters, functional ABC transporters. So that means that it can cause infection by detoxifying all the drug effects the humans have. So this is the particular gene family we found that it has undergone some selection in the selection pressure while culturing them in the passages. And some genes also have pseudogenized, that is, they have lost, they have introduced a stop codon, premature stop codon in the gene.
All right. Afreen, I hope that answers your question. If there are any other questions, please post it in Q&A box or chat box, whichever way you are more comfortable. We'll wait for half a minute before we can take a few more questions. In case there are none, we may conclude, but we'll wait for a couple of minutes. I would like to check with you that all the tools that you said you have made available on the GitHub repository. Am I right
Yes,
about?
yes, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Some are published, some are not published, some we are still working on it.
All right. Okay, fine. Looks like there is a thank you comment from the audience and no other question. So I would like to personally thank on behalf of the department, Professor Tripathi, for being available and presenting a wonderful body of work from your lab. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
So with that, we have come to the end of the talks, but we still have